shortage of parking space existence. Europe City. That to be kind to people in the cities is the cheapest you can do. The infrastructure for pedestrians, buses or metro or anything, and that could easily be done in a number of steps. Like I mentioned in Sofia, I suggested one place to start, which is of course a little thing that the sidewalks are full of holes, but that makes elderly people having a bad time and children having a bad time and accidents are happening, whatever. And it is relatively simple to fill the holes and have a campaign about such a thing. That's a little thing, but it's quite important. In Barcelona, they also had another campaign. They said that they had no, in the corners there was no ramps for wheelchairs. And then they say in 2 years' time, we will make sure that all over the city we change the corners so that trams and wheelchairs, because that's something which is very easy to define, and it is relatively easy and cheap to repair, and it's very visible, and everybody can see it being better, and everybody will think that you are a great guy, rather than make some big fancy project in a corner. Small things that could be important, but of course there are many things in a city like this one, and I'm quite sure about what is happening here. You get more and more cars, and the public transportation is still very poor, and I can see no reason whatsoever why it shouldn't be a very nice bicycle city. We have even, I know that they found out that if a guy takes his bike and go 1 kilometer, the society gains 25 cents euro. And if the same guy takes his car and goes the same kilometer, society loses. Not only that the car, you buy the car and you buy the tires and you buy the gasoline.
You have to do from all sides. You have to ensure the public transportation good, this infrastructure, and I mean how you cope with all this system, because it's not just having one thing and not having done the other thing. So how it's better, I know, to start with. What should be the first thing to start with?
So, like, do you know out of your experience what to do in these cases when the administration says, like, we don't have money for bikes, but we have just good money for like 2 other car streets or something like that?
Yeah. Of course, it is a matter of best practice. Everything, and then there was a counter movement starting with Jane Jacobs and whatever. And I think that Moscow is a very good example, that they realized that they have got a very shitty town, and the whole world was laughing about Moscow. And I know that the inspiration to improve Moscow came from the president of Russia, Medvedev, who called all the mayors together and said, our cities are a laughing stock for the whole world because they are so unattractive and they are full of cars and pollution and whatever. We cannot accept that. Go home and put your life together. And then he removed the mayor of Moscow and put in another one. And this other one, Sobyanin, he was put in exactly to make the city nice and attractive. And it's a very moving story, because I was just finished by working for Bloomberg in New York, and gave a talk about our work with various cities where this deputy mayor from Moscow was there, and then he said, that's what we have been ordered to do. then he came rushing over and said, when can you come? and we are now the best friends in the world, the Anton and I. And so we came and advice, gave them. Sometimes they need somebody from outside to come and say the obvious things, and also you may all, and also some of the long way. And the longer away, the more expert he is. That's why I've done so much in Australia. Because if somebody comes all the way from Europe, it must be very important what he has to say. So there is this how to influence the mindset, and I would again and again emphasize that the most important thing is to change the mindset, to change the way people look at things, and to change the mindset now is he made a lot of demonstrations, whatever, but they pressurized Sadiq Khan, or they pressurized the mayor, and he of course would not say anything about cars, because you cannot say I'll get rid of the motor transportation. But you can say, I will make the city sustainable. That is good. And then, unfortunately, you have to reduce the car driving to make it sustainable. But that, don't say it in the first round. Don't say
like that. And there was this idea suggested by a team of urbanists. There was a local urbanist, but some people from Italy, and they suggested to move the city in a way along the river in
Business
the
administration.
yeah, because I don't know, like the concept of Chisinau is that you have the political center, the business center, the economic center, the commercial center, everything is in one area. So there was this idea of deconcentrating in a way the city and developing a polycentric, like multiple centers.
And mixing it something.
Yeah, so and one idea was slowly and to move the business area around the river, which will gentrify it, of course. That's another.
yeah, and that could also sound like a very expensive and. But of course, in this case, we know who is to pay for it. But what I was talking about was more recreational.
Yeah.
And something we did not talk about much is that in these 50 years, we've got much, much more leisure time. And much of it is because we get older and have many active. I think that in Denmark, they have an average of 22 years from they retire until they pass away. And that's the same time as from birth until you get a bachelor degree. So it is a long time. And old people are more and more active and fresh. So there is a lot of leisure time and a lot of energy in society and a lot of new challenges. And also, even if everybody say they work harder than ever, there are weekends and there are holidays, and we have graphs which shows how this actually, that the working hour week is going down and the number of holiday weeks are going up, so there is a number of developments in the society that we have a lot of leisure time, and a lot of emphasis of the quality of life is placed on the leisure time. Many people go to work to have money for the leisure time. And they go to office every morning to have a good holiday or good weekend, whatever.
Talking about leisure time, remember yesterday Maria was telling you about our small project that we got with the Germans, actors of urban change, and transforming the street into a pedestrian, Mikle Street, the one which is here.
Oh yeah.
So the question was, can I see that we know
But
now?
tell me, do you have that is a plan, or is it
This is a concept.
realized?
This is a concept.
Do you have any car-free areas?
Now, yes.
There are some squares?
Here. So just
Two blocks.
Yes, the small like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's
Here's the cathedral and it is behind the cathedral.
And the
Hotel is here.
the hotel was there here.
Yeah.
It's here, yeah.
But it, in
Sorry.
terms of infrastructure, it has only, like the pavement
Yeah.
and the lights, and that's it. There are no benches, there are
No
no
attractions,
Yeah.
no
Yes,
cafes,
Yeah.
There
no
are,
shops.
no, there are no shops, but there are few cafes.
Yeah.
So it was our former mayor, but said, I want a pedestrian street.
Yeah.
And I will do
Yeah.
it."
Yeah.
And he did it.
An interesting thing about the Copenhagen scheme from '62 was that the length was 1 kilometer, and that meant that actually they made a route so you can walk from one end of the city to the other. So suddenly, walking became. It was actually quicker to walk through the city than to take any bus or anything. And this idea that you will promote walking rather than, this is what they do in America, they close 2 blocks and call it a mall, a shopping mall, and then they are surprised that people are not happy. But it's very deep. One can say, why should you go here? But if they, I don't know, but if they close one of the major routes through the city, then suddenly you have an alternative way of moving in the city. So that's a different strategy.
But how do you
Also in Melbourne, they have closed major streets through the whole city.
How do you start building or transforming a street into pedestrian? Because we are now at this step when we have to conceptualize what do we do next.
Yeah.
So, from your experience, from the work you've done in the world, how did this changes start? And who initiates the process, and how do you deal with because it's a lot of work with the authorities here. So,
Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah.
They are not very much willing.
I mentioned several times that the best thing I can advise is that some strategies and visions are developed.
That's another question we have. How you develop a strategy?
Yeah, but and there are so many now around the world, and about that we will be CO2 neutral. In Copenhagen, it's 25, and by 50 there will be no use of fossil fuel. And they sort of line this up already now, and then they can start to go for these. And then they have these shorter ones. We will do much for the people in the city for this and this reason. And it's very typical that they link these strategies. Normally you can never say we'll do it for the betterment of man, but you can say we do this for the climate. That's all right. And we can say I do this for health because it's much more healthy, and we do it to reduce pollution. If you say we do it to make a nicer city, everybody will laugh. But also one really strong one is to say we make a safer city, because then everybody is interested in a safe city with less where people are not so afraid, whatever, or less crime or molesting. And also I mentioned that what really can change a city is God. That God can make an earthquake or something else, and then suddenly you can change the city. But you can't do it just by saying, I'll do it to make a better city.
We're waiting for it. There was one in 77, one in 90, so another one should come.
Yeah, but you don't have... sometimes when I see some overpass or some very complicated freeway, I would always ask, do you have earthquakes here? Because then we can get rid of this in a smart way. But we can never vote to take a complicated traffic structure down, but God can help us. But you have no complicated bridges and clover leaves and whatever.
No, but
So-
we have illegally built high buildings on plots where there should be 2 levels, 3 levels, there are 12 levels.
And then people are not allowed, but they do,
Yes.
and there's no,
No repercussion, nothing. It's
yeah, okay, yeah.
So
Yeah, but that's only God.
maybe one last question before.
But we have the same God, I think.
Okay.
But
But he
I'll tell you-
listens to you and doesn't.
I'll tell you one more thing about our traffic engineer, talking about God. But the traffic engineer, he retired from Copenhagen, and then we hired him to our company. And that was when we got the commission in New York. So this guy was on our team in New York, and he bicycled all over New York and was actually advising about structuring the New York network of bicycle lanes. That was fine. But then he told me something which I did not know, but suddenly I realized that must be true. He said, every city has an arbitrary level of traffic depending on how much asphalt they gave the traffic. And he said, if New York had not 12 avenues or 10 avenues, but had 12 avenues, there will be 20% more traffic, and they will find a level of service which was depending on this number of traffic, and everybody would say, this is given by God, you cannot touch that. But if New York had 8 avenues, they will have 20% less traffic, and they will have a level of service depending on this number of cars, and then everybody would say, this is given by God, and you cannot touch it. And we know that they have much traffic in Paris, and why is that? They have the boulevards. And they have many problems in London. Why is that? Because they have all these crooked streets which are narrow. But they are filled to capacity. But if they've had wider streets, they've had much more traffic. So the level of traffic in any city is arbitrary, depending on how much asphalt you gave them. And that is what also has led to, in New York, this concept of taking asphalt away. And we found out, or we started to question, they started to say, we have no Champs-Élysées in New York. We have no famous square. We have a square, Times Square, but it's not a square, it's a traffic junction. So if we have no place where people can go and walk and come and whatever, except Central Park, 8 kilometers that way. And then they started to question, where can we establish this sort of thing? And then we started to say, do you really need Broadway? And of course they needed Broadway. But then they modeled it, and traffic engineers, they love to model. They model if they take away Broadway, and found out that all the traffic in all the other streets would be much easier if they didn't have this. So actually, by taking out Broadway, they could have 17% more capacity, and then the traffic engineers was very happy. And then they sold this whole project of Times Square to make the traffic more smooth and reduce accidents. So it was done to make the cars more happy. And I was specifically forbidden to mention people and cities for people or anything like having a good time and needing public space, because it was all officially to help the traffic. And actually it worked. The traffic is running smoother and the traffic accidents have gone down. So that was correct. But Of course, here you could easily have a level of service with 25% less cars, easily, 50%. And then, of course, you have many people living here and they have their car.
And talking about cars, one of our last questions is like cities in development, like Chisinau, in a stage of development that Chisinau is now. Can they leapfrog the period or skip the traffic collapse that happened to Western cities in the 70s, or should we necessarily go through all this process to understand that we need cities for people or not?
I think that you can easily leapfrog. If you were in India or in Bangladesh, I would doubt if we could jump from rickshaws to public transportation without giving them a little car. In Denmark, it's very interesting. We have what I call the fourth wave. The first one they walked, and then they had horses, and then they had cars, and now we've tried all that, and now we can do bicycling, because that's smarter and better in various ways. So, and many of the people who have bikes, they have a car somewhere, but don't use it. So, but I think in this case, there are so many examples now of policies, and we have such pressure about the to have less waste of materials and lower pollution and do more for the climate and for the health, that one could say that we can have a number of policies. And for God's sake, don't say it's against the cars, but it's to achieve something else. That's why I think that it's so important that you have a 2030 plan, a vision, that by 2030 this city would be like this.
Yeah, probably I have the last question. I remember in the first evening you were saying that some many years ago somebody considered that what you're doing is a waste of time and not a big perspective. And I don't know about the colleagues, but sometimes I'm in the same situation. And what?
Personal therapy question.
Yeah,
It's
yes.
a constant state of mind.
Yeah, so it looks like it's. What, I don't know, do you have any advices for us, or how did you cope with that, or how did you get over with things and still you're doing your job? How did you do that? What you would advise to us?
No, but very funnily, my daughter is in the same situation. She's working in cancer research, and she has developed, or she's developed a number of things which could, some other treatments with electricity, and something with chemotherapy, that they can shoot directly where the problem is instead of shooting at the whole body, and then they can shoot 300 times stronger doses, and then the effect is much bigger on the illness, and there are some good side effects also. But that's one story, and everybody thought that she was crazy and she would ruin her career and stop doing this. But now she's found, which is even worse, that they don't need chemotherapy, because if they shoot calcium into the cells, it has the same effect. And calcium costs nothing. Chemotherapy costs a fortune. And the industry, medical industry, they're furious.
Of course.
And also this method enables this kind of treatment to be used in developing countries, because it's very cheap. It's a little battery of electricity and then some calcium. which is very cheap medicine. And now she's very much, she's just been professor. But many years they thought she was crazy. And also they thought, and that was never the politicians and never the citizens who thought I was crazy, but that was the architects. They thought really that all this about people has nothing to do with architects. Leave it, and you have to come up with a professor here. And then you can have these buildings.
This is the most nice walk I've had for one time. I think it's a good idea with this snow.